And here we are at Snoqualmie Falls Park. You can see the falls right there. Come around the little trees and such. You see how far down everything is. See all the people here looking at it. You see the lodge there, the buildings there. There's a power plant built into this falls, generating some electricity. It is one of the oldest hydroelectric power plants here in the state of Washington. Built in 1898 or sometime like that. Very spectacular falls. Look at the valley there. Oh, got a good view here. With this pan. I'll let you watch this for a while. Now, when it comes to renewable energy sources, technically there's no such thing as renewable energy. But once the sun fuses hydrogen into helium, it's helium. Fortunately, the sun has about 5 billion years worth of supply left, and will run its main sequence for another 5 billion years or so. So we Earthlings don't have anything to worry about in the short term. Now, some of that solar energy causes water to vaporize off the oceans, and it falls in the mountains as rain or snow, and it comes down through here where we tap into some of that energy and generate electricity with the falling water. Running the water down through penstocks to Pelton wheels. I think there's an outflow down there from the power plant. They could run all the water through there and we would not have falls, we would have a wet cliff. But they let some of the water over the falls, as you can see. Now, the limitation on falling water as a source of electricity is there's only so much falling water, and our population is growing. Pretty much all the dam sites in the state of Washington have been used up, and in Idaho, Oregon, California, there are dam sites left in British Columbia, but it's up to the Canadian people in British Columbia whether or not to develop them if and when they need that electricity. They could develop them, or they could build coal power plants or burn methane gas or uranium for their electricity if and when they need it. But we in Washington need additional electricity right now. So this is why Puget Sound Energy invested in a coal-fired power plant in Colstrip, Montana, and why we've all invested in the Whoops 2 plant over in Richland to generate electricity from uranium. And we will be needing more electricity as time goes on. Now, there are those who seem to think that burning coal is going to change the climate. I think it's a little ridiculous. Myself, I don't agree with that because, frankly, the climate's changed plenty long before we started burning coal for electricity, before we started burning fossil fuels. And the thing is, then the question comes, well, outside of what we can supply with falling water, can we supply all of our electricity needs burning coal? And the answer is yes, we have that much coal. We got 62 billion short tons in Utah we're not even digging. And our descendants 100 years from now will know it's still there. Their descendants 200 years from now will know it's there. It may eventually be dug. So we have that. We also have plenty of methane gas from the fracking. So we're getting a lot of energy that we didn't think we were going to have. But they're fossil fuel sources. We just have hundreds of years supplies instead of dozens of years of supply, as it turns out. Much to the chagrin of those who want us to use the alternative sources. But if there's plenty of coal and plenty of methane gas to generate electricity, then nuclear power and windmills and solar power all look like solutions looking for a problem. Now, nuclear power is useful because you can run the power plant pretty much like this Hydroelectric facility, 24/7. You generate electricity on a steady basis. Coal and gas-fired power plants run the same way. You run that steam cycle, as long as you supply the fuel, the steam cycle will generate electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is how power companies need the electricity. What is the problem with windmills? One word, intermittent. What's the problem with solar power? 2 words, square miles, as in what you need in order to generate enough electricity from solar energy to make a dent in our overall electricity use. That's not to say that windmills aren't useful. If you have a need for an intermittent power supply, such as pumping water out of a wet field, then windmills work. As long as the total amount of water is the number of acre feet that you need removed from the field, it doesn't matter whether it does it all at once or in spurts throughout the week or so, as long as it gets it done. That's why the Dutch built windmills to pump water out of their wet fields. And solar power is fine if you need just a little bit of electricity, not a lot, and it saves you the trouble of running a wire out to the site, such as a remote telephone station along an interstate freeway, an emergency telephone station. Perfectly good fine use for it there. If you need a little bit of electricity, not a lot, and it saves you the cost of running a wire or running a recharger, then solar power is fine. But we're not going to replace our big coal-fired plants with solar cells unless we're willing to build square miles of them. And a square mile of anything is a big environmental impact and a big cost item. It just is. So that's where it is. You know, and such. Those are our energy supplies. But this is a very pretty day. Very pretty falls. Very pretty everything. So you can just watch this all the time as long as I don't drop my GoPro camera down 200 feet. I'm hanging on to it pretty tight. Pick up. Yeah, we just pan slowly. Got a little fir tree trying to grow on the cliff. Wonder how long it will last. The one next to it was eventually cut down. Just wasn't a good place for a fir tree to grow. I'll lift you up high over my head. Another fir tree growing out of the bushes. And here's the source of seeds for those fir trees you see growing on the cliff, and I tripped over these steps. A little birdie. I wonder if I could lift you up over the head. Probably not. Looks like we have another lookout up ahead. There's the parking lot where I'm parked at. More little fir trees growing on the cliff. I think they cut them down every once in a while. Oh, we see more falls from here. Got big lights to light them up. Big searchlights. Don't climb over the fence. That first step is a loo-loo. There's the lodge. Used to be you can eat breakfast there. It'll stuff your gullet with breakfast food. And I think I'll pass on that. No drone or UAV flying allowed. Okay, how about handheld GoPros? I don't see any signs banning them, so here we go. We'll go back down this path. See the far valley. Some western red cedar here. Underneath this maple type of tree. Those things get big enough, they have music wood in the center for guitars. Valuable stuff. Landowners have complained about their big old maples disappearing. The center section of the logs sawed out. Anyway, down this path, another maple. Maple growing over there on the cliff's edge. There's that Doug we were talking about earlier. Watch your step, you can tumble over these steps very easily. Down we go. See the river through the shrubs. Another open lookout. See the falls again. See the cliffs on the opposite side. Up and over your head. Tree on the edge of the cliff. Down. This is where we're going. Bunch of dead blackberries. Wonder if they sprayed them or they just died. Hard to say. I can see how some people might have a cow over spraying the blackberries if that's what happened. But maybe they just died. What a view. We seem to have an outflow of water here. There's the main Snoqualmie River pouring out. See a little rainbow from the spray. See the cliff that we walked along. Peregrine falcons. I'm not seeing any today, but that don't mean they're not there. I think I'll climb this hill while panning the falls. You see, if we're serious about replacing coal and methane gas as a source of electricity with nuclear power, well, I'll give you an idea what that would take. The problem with splitting atoms is that the result are split atoms. All kinds of fission products with nuclei between 1/3 and 2/3 the size of the uranium nuclei that we're splitting, or plutonium nuclei. Those are the two types of nuclei we can split to generate electricity. And the problem with that is that they have very short half-lives, a lot of them. But short half-life is like 1,000 years, you see. So you get very intense radioactivity. In an operating power plant reactor, once it's up and running for a while, 7% of the BTUs being generated are being generated by the decay heat of the fission products. Now that's fine as far as generating electricity. You just get some of your fission products, some of your kilowatt hours out of the fission products decaying. But they're still pretty hot in terms of not wanting to be exposed to them with your biological body, even after the power plant's been shut down a while, and you remove the spent fuel rods to put in new fuel rods. Now, what we're burning in our power plants presently is the 0.7% of the uranium that is fissionable U-234 and U-235. The rest is U-238. And when we remove the U-235 from the uranium, what's left is what they call depleted uranium. Mostly U-238, with only about 0.2% being the U-235. Generally, you take about 10 pounds of natural uranium from an ore deposit, you run it through the cyclotrons that they have over at Oak Ridge or other facilities like that, and you get about 1.5 pounds of 5% enriched uranium. That's 5% U-234 and U-235 that you can make into power plant fuel. And then the rest of it, the 8.5 pounds, is that your depleted uranium. So that's what's happening. Now, I originally thought that we should just fully develop our nuclear power system because I believed we had plenty of uranium. Well, that turns out to not be quite the case. To run the 100 or so power plant reactors we have, each at a bit more than 1,000 megawatts in electricity generating capacity, we are importing uranium, which defeats the energy independence purpose of building nuclear power plants. It's simply because we're not mining enough uranium to supply more power plants than that if all we're going to do is burn the naturally fissionable U-234, U-235 that's in the uranium ore. So if we're going to expand the use of our nuclear power, we're going to have to do one of two things. We're going to have to take that abundant U-238 and convert it to plutonium, reprocess the fuel rods to get the plutonium, then make mixed oxide fuel rods for the other power plants with them enriched to about 5% plutonium. Now, people might worry, well, what about the weapons and bomb type plutonium? Well, weapons grade plutonium is mostly Pu-239, which is fissionable, and very little Pu-240 within it, a low percentage. I can tell you what the maximum percentage of Pu-240 in the plutonium would be and still be able to make a workable bomb, but I'm not going to say that on the internet or in this. I think I will not do that. Those who are trying to build nuclear bombs in places like Iran or South Africa or Israel or Pakistan or other such places, North Korea, they know what that percentage is. But we don't need to blab it all over the place. But still, if you leave the fuel rods any length of time in your reactor where you're making the plutonium, the PO240 rises to the point where you can't make a bomb with it, which is fine with me, you know. But you can make power plant fuel out of it, no problem, with mixed oxide fuel rods. You can use the depleted uranium in uranium oxide, and you can use plutonium and plutonium oxide, mix it in, and you can get a 5% enrichment, which is fine for most power plants that we have. But to do that, that means we'll have to build a couple of breeders to turn the U-238 into plutonium, and then we're going to have to reprocess the fuel rods. Reprocessing the fuel rods over at Hanford to make the bomb plutonium, well, that worked out real swell. We have lots of really high-level fission product waste all over the Hanford reservation, packing these big vats in. We got this long-term expensive program of where we're trying to solidify it into glass so that we can store it for the next 45,000 years or so in order to keep it from polluting the rest of the environment. Well, bomb plutonium, yeah, I think we only made a couple 100,000 pounds of bomb plutonium all told, and that just made enough bombs to blow over the Soviet Union multiple times. More bomb plutonium than we actually needed for all the bombs. And we only have a small percentage of that bomb plutonium in our active nuclear deterrents right now. We had a deal with Kazakhstan and Ukraine. When the Soviet Union fell apart, they inherited some bombs and bomb plutonium from the old Soviet Union. They decided they didn't want them, and so they sold the bomb plutonium to us, which on the condition that we make mixed oxide fuel rods, and we burned it up in reactors to generate electricity, which is a perfectly good way to disarm in terms of nuclear disarmament. You know, what do you do with the bomb plutonium? Well, burn it up in reactors. Then you can't make a bomb with it anymore. But the problem was in the Soviet Union and over at Hanford and Savannah River, we have some serious waste problems as a result of making bomb plutonium by reprocessing fuel rods. That's a couple 100,000 pounds of plutonium, both Soviet Union and United States, total. A power plant reactor to generate 1,000 megawatts of electricity, and that's just one reactor, would burns up about 10 pounds of fissionables every 24 hours. Right now, the fissionables are the naturally occurring U-234 and U-235 that we find in uranium ore. If we're going to use plutonium reprocessed from fuel rods that were used in a breeder reactor, that means that we're going to have to make 10 pounds of plutonium for every day that we plan to operate a power plant reactor with it. Now, 10 pounds of plutonium in a power plant reactor, let's say it runs about 300 days of the year, that's 3,000 pounds of plutonium from the reprocessing. If we make the same amount of highly radioactive fission product waste, reprocessing breeder reactor fuel rods to make that 3,000 pounds of plutonium as we did to make 3,000 pounds of bomb plutonium, we get the exact same waste dump problem, only with one reactor. Imagine 100 reactors. Now you're talking 300,000 pounds of power plant plutonium. We're making 300,000 pounds worth of fission product waste to extract that 300,000 pounds of power plant plutonium. Each year, we're operating 100 power plants out of that breeder reactor plutonium. And 300,000 pounds of fission product waste, the fission product waste that's generated by that 300,000 pounds of plutonium. This is 1 year of operating 100 power plants to replace some of the coal that we're burning, to replace some of the methane gas that we're burning, because we're all afraid it's going to warm up the planet. God forbid that we feed all these plants here 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide and maybe 500 parts per million. Plants grow faster, but we can't have that. No, no, no. Then we're going to generate an awful lot of fission product waste. 1 year be about equivalent of all the fission product waste of all the nuclear weapons programs of the US, Soviet Union, France, Britain, India, Pakistan, Iran, North Korea combined. That's to feed 100 power plant reactors with plutonium from a breeder. Okay, we can do it. But let's not fool ourselves that that's what we'll be committing ourselves to if we do it. Some people might say, gee, maybe we should just burn the coal instead. That's an option. Maybe we should just burn the methane gas instead. That's an option. The alternative is we make the plutonium with a breeder, or we take thorium and we make U-233 with a molten salt reactor. Oh, that's a lovely thing. What's a molten salt reactor? Well, let's say its operating temperature runs about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. What's the operating temperature of a pressurized water reactor generating steam? 700 degrees Fahrenheit. See the problem? You think Chernobyl was bad? Imagine a molten salt reactor busting up. I don't know. I guess we could do that, but let's not kid ourselves. We got hundreds of years of fossil fuels left for generating power. And of course, this Snoqualmie power plant will run as long as there's water in the Snoqualmie River for the next, 10,000 years perhaps, till the glaciers come back down. So those are our choices. Just keep in mind, global warming may not be that bad a problem. Just saying, unless we're willing to take on the costs and highly radioactive waste management that'll come with converting U-238 into plutonium for power plants, or thorium into U-233 for power plants. We're gonna have to do one or the other if we expand our use of nuclear power. The alternative is just continue to burn the coal and the gas. Well, that's enough lecturing. I think we'll just enjoy this pretty scenery.